now everybody's going nuts about the fiscal cliff. Oh my God, tax-mageddon, fiscal cliff, we're going to die with it. So Lucas Lillyholm, our producer, did some research on this and found out who created the words fiscal cliff, because that didn't exist before. It was all of a sudden everybody started talking about it. Turns out Ben Bernanke, the head of the Fed, started talking about, oh, we're going to have a fiscal cliff. Make sure that you don't raise those taxes. So here we are, and of course, both sides.
Who's supposed to create that term, though? I mean, I'm going to be devil's advocate here for a second. Like what? Like,
no, that term is not supposed to exist. It's made up to scare the living hell out of you.
It's a frame. You cannot think about that in a way that is positive. It's a cliff you're going off of. It's negative.
So you must do something. You must make sure that we do not increase taxes, because it's a fiscal cliff.
But the way they've written the budget, I would argue, says that there's going to be $500 billion out of the budget next year unless they fix something here.
Right. No. But look at your framing. Yeah. I don't think there's anything to fix. I want to balance the budget.
Yeah.
The way I would balance the budget is by raising taxes, including on everybody, by the way, right? So I don't have any problem with that. I would frame that as not a fiscal cliff, but a budget fix.
But it does.
The budget fix is coming. Hey, everybody, great news. The budget fix is coming.
Budget rebirth.
Well, what they're saying is if it doesn't come, there are consequences to be paid.
No. Yeah. The budget fix is if we do nothing.
If we do nothing.
Okay. But that's true, though, isn't it?
Well, not entirely, but yes, on balance, it's true. Yeah.
So it's all in the framing, and it's one thing when Republicans frame it that way, Wall Street people, the Fed, et cetera, frame it that way. But of course, the Democrats play along. So, and that's why then the media goes, well, both sides agree, so it must be a fiscal cliff. So now John Boehner came out yesterday and said, oh, hell no, we're not going to work with Obama on taxes. As we showed you on the show last night, he told Diane Sawyer, still the tax increase for the rich, non-negotiable.
And essentially Mitch McConnell said that the basically powerless Mitch McConnell said the same thing.
That's right. And still calling President Obama a failure, et cetera. Apparently hasn't looked up the definition yet. When you were supposed to pick up a lot of seats in the Senate and you lost seats in the Senate, that would be a failure, Mitch. And that's your leadership in the Senate for the Republicans. So, President Obama going to give a speech today on the fiscal cliff. And is he going to play along with the framing, or is he going to draw a line in the sand and say, oh yeah, Boehner, you want to talk about line in the sand? I'm the guy who won the election. Well, we got a mixed bag today. So first, he said, hey, let's remember who the people actually voted for.
And I just want to point out, this was a central question during the election. It was debated over and over again. And on Tuesday night, we found out that the majority of Americans agree with my approach. And that includes Democrats, independents, and a lot of Republicans across the country, as well as independent economists and budget experts. That's how you reduce the deficit, with a balanced approach. So our job now is to get a majority in Congress to reflect the will of the American people. But on Tuesday, they said loud and clear that they won't tolerate dysfunction. They won't tolerate politicians who view compromise as a dirty word. I intend to deliver for them in my second term. And I expect to find willing partners in both parties to make that happen.
Now, so in my view of things, that's mixed news, but let's start with the really good news first. Okay, so he says very clearly, I got elected, and I said that we're going to raise taxes on the rich, on people making over $250,000, and that's the will of the people. I'm glad that he affirmatively stated that. It was nice and strong. And afterwards, news came out that he will veto any plan that does not reinstate the rates that we had under Clinton, get rid of the Bush tax cuts for the rich.
And let's not sweep this under the carpet. I mean, this is a gift to the liberals. This is a gift to the unions. This is exactly what they needed to hear. Yeah, and there's no way to even look skeptically at me. That is exactly what this is.
That's what John was doing.
Exactly what this is.
The skeptical look is that he's coming out strong and saying, look, I got elected, I'm going to have what I want. But the problem is, for a long time, we haven't liked what he seems to want in terms of his approach to this. Like, he seems to want the grand bargain. We don't want that.
Right, so that's why we started with the positive.
There is some positive.
So that's that. If he sticks with it, because I wasn't even sure he was going to stick with that, right? Mm-hmm. I thought there was some chance that he goes, oh, we're going to do tax reform. And by the way, there's still some chance, but it looks a lot less likely after today, right? Well, a lot less likely, because he could have said tax reform. Oh, we took away some exemptions and deductions, so we lowered the rates for the rich.
But he's walking the walk on where the burden will be and where the burden won't be in the immediate.
Okay, so that's the good news. Okay, so let's just call it what it is. Now, the part I didn't like in that was balanced approach, and and we're going to compromise, and we got elected for compromise. Now, those are good, fine things, and you should compromise, and there's obviously nothing wrong with a balanced approach. But one side is saying, even though they just lost, we're sticking to our position. And the other side isn't saying we're sticking to our position so that eventually you can have compromise. The other side is saying, I already compromise. So when somebody says, I'm already halfway, and the other guy says, I haven't moved an inch, guess where the actual compromise is going to be? It's going to be even further towards the Republicans. Yeah. So it's a poor negotiation stance. It's Obama 101. But it wasn't what I was most concerned about. Here's what I'm most concerned about.
I want to be clear. I'm not wedded to every detail of my plan. I'm open to compromise. I'm open to new ideas. I'm committed to solving our fiscal challenges. But I refuse to accept any approach that isn't balanced. I am not going to ask students and seniors and middle-class families to pay down the entire deficit while people like me making over $250,000 aren't asked to pay a dime more in taxes.
So the parts I did not like in there. Number one, my whole agenda is open for negotiation. No, but you just won an overwhelming victory. Can you draw some lines in the sand? Can you say, hey, you know what? I got elected for this.
He didn't say my whole agenda is open.
But he said all the details are open.
But he might change his party.
But call it what it is. He said, I'm not wedded to every single thing in here, okay?
Whereas Boehner said, I'm wedded to
I'm
no
not wedded
tax
to the entirety
increases.
of it. I mean, it's a list of 10 things, and I'm not, I'm 6 and 8 or I can talk to you about.
Part two, what I didn't like. Okay, I won't, now it sounded good like, hey, you know what, it's got to be balanced, and I'm not going to let you take just from senior citizens instead. But what he actually said was, I'm not going to let you balance the entire budget on the backs of senior citizens, the poor, the middle class. In other words, I'm going to let you balance most of the budget on their backs. And that's not just an inference that I'm reading into it or being too nuanced. He's said over and over again, his proposal is $4 trillion in cuts overall. $3 for every $1 comes from spending cuts. So 75% come from spending cuts, and only a quarter come in supposed tax increases. Okay, now, even if you grant him that he gets that 25% tax increase, which I don't believe, because the devil's in the details, right? The 75%, why? We just won. And by the way, the fiscal cliff, and that's the other part I don't like. He agreed that there's a fiscal cliff. He talks about fiscal challenges. He agrees completely lock, stock, and barrel with their framing, which is nonsense. But right now, in that so-called fiscal cliff, we have $1.2 trillion in cuts coming. But half of it is coming from defense, which I don't mind at all. Our defense budget is bloated, it is inefficient, it is wasteful, oftentimes fraudulent defense contractor work, etc. So instead, when they do the new spending cuts, it's going to be almost 3 times as much as spending cuts, and almost none of it is going to come from defense. Well, that's 6 times worse for us. And so what are you bragging about? That's a disaster. That's where I agree with John in the skepticism.
Well, I would say I've been looking more into this because generally I would agree with you that it looks like if we simply don't do anything, it benefits us. But we do have to look at the possible effects. And so we do want the budget to be balanced. That's one objective. But there are other objectives like continued economic growth. And look, we can't just take CBO analysis when it favors us. When it's against us, we also have to trust them to be intellectually honest. And they came out with data today that part of it's good, part of it's bad. And they said that, look, if you're going to let any parts of this expire, the part that's going to hurt the economy least is letting the tax reductions for the most wealthy people. You can let that expire and it won't hurt the economy much, which is good for us.
Right.
But they're also saying that if you let other parts of it expire, it could mean possibly hundreds of thousands or millions of jobs. And so we do have to weigh that against our desire to balance the budget quickly.
So that's where I disagree with economists, and you can feel free to ignore my views on that because you can say, hey, look, that's your opinion, but here are guys who are crunching numbers, etc. So I'm being as fair and honest as I can about that. But I don't believe that tax cuts stimulate the economy. And in fact, they will tell you the spending actually stimulates the economy far more.
Yeah,
spending always has historically in modern history, in middle American history, and early American history. Spending has, well, no, I'm talking about in American history.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you look at that, then you see the incredible irrationality even if you don't agree with me and you think the middle class tax cuts stimulate the economy, everybody agrees based on those numbers, the spending stimulates it more. So why would we do 3 times as much spending cuts, hurt the economy 3 times as much as tax increases? That makes no sense. Now, me being a budget hawk, I wouldn't do tax cuts for anybody, but I'm in the minority on that, and I will obviously lose on that. Democrats and Republicans overwhelmingly agree to middle class tax cuts. So, but the spending cuts, especially to Medicare and Medicaid, are unnecessary, counterproductive, anti-progressive, anti-American, because the American people overwhelmingly, over 70%, say do not cut those programs, even if it balances the budget.
And you're right, Cenk. But one of the things you did say is that most of it's going to fall on the back of these people. We don't know what it's going to look like now. And I've said this. I said this earlier today, and I don't know if you heard, John. I think they're going to kick the ball down the road to March. I don't think he's going to work this with a lame duck Congress. I think that it's his intention to do something that pushes this down, but to announce, as he did today, that he is going to keep the tax. Get rid of the tax cuts for the wealthy. One thing that really disappointed me about the president today is that he didn't do a press conference. The winning president always does a press conference, comes back to the White House, gives a press conference. That's a place for him to answer directly the questions that we're asking here. And that was a disappointment to me that he didn't give a press conference.
All right, so 2 things about that.